I have the pleasure of introducing Thomas Moore, who has been a monk, a musician, a university professor, and a psychotherapist. Today, he lectures widely on holistic medicine, spirituality, and psychotherapy and the arts. He has a PhD in religion from Syracuse University and has won several awards for his work. He writes fiction and music and often works with his wife, artist and yoga instructor, Hari Kiran. He writes regular columns for Resurgence, Spirituality and Health, and the Huffington Post, and is the author of the best-selling book, Care of the Soul, and 15 other books on spirituality. Thomas, your newest book, called A Religion of One's Own, does that fly in the face of traditional religious practices that involve religious doctrine?
It might just a little bit, but I don't think it really does when you get down to it, because I'm someone who loves religion. I began studying religion and taking interest when I was a kid, when I was a child. And I studied theology, and I was, as you said, I was in a monastery. I got a PhD in religion. I mean, that shows a fair interest and appreciation, actually a deep love of religion and all the traditions. I have a deep love of my own tradition, Catholicism. But there are some differences, and in my thinking today, I've changed over the years. Having been exposed to so many different religious traditions, and I don't mean superficially either, really being affected by them, and also depth psychology. And my practice of psychotherapy over the years, I've had a chance, really a privilege, to work with people at a very deep level and find out what's going on deeply in them. And I think there's a lot of confusion about religion. So I would say that even though what I suggest in this book is trying to bring religion up to date in a way, trying to say that people have changed and we have to be more individuals and be engaged in thinking about what we're doing and not just accepting what's given to us. So in that sense, what I have to say does go against the traditions as they have been so far, at least in some cases, in many cases. But behind it all is a love of the traditions, and I recommend in this book that we go deeper into the traditions, your own tradition if you have one, or many others, and not do it superficially, but really get into them and learn something.
How do you distinguish between religion and spirituality, or do you? Do these words mean different things to you?
They mean different things to me, but that's because, as I said, in my early years, I was a monk. I lived in a monastery for a long time, for well over a dozen years. And in that time, when I was in a monastery, we definitely talked about religion. We thought we were part of religion and our lives. We even called ourselves religious. Like, it's hard to say that today, but like we were not the adjective religious, we were religious, meaning we were religious people. And even so, we also talked about the spiritual life as something different. It wasn't like something else elsewhere, but it was part of religion. So although our whole lives were involved with religion, there were things that we did that focused on the spiritual life. And primarily that would be something like learning how to meditate, or learning how to pray in a very deep way, or studying theology, and studying the spiritual matters could be part of our spiritual life as well. So we had a distinction between religion and spirituality, but spirituality was part of religion. So I have a hard time when people say, and they often tell me this, they say, if you're going to talk about religion, I'm not going to be here. But if you talk about spirituality, I'll be happy. I don't know how to make that distinction. To me, they're related to each other, and one's part of the other, and I think they're both necessary.
In your book, you refer to the fact that religion has a soul. Could you explain what you mean by that?
It's not easy. It took me several years to figure out the difference between soul and spirit, so it's hard to put it in a few words. But generally speaking, this is speaking in broad terms. The soul has to do with their deep feelings, emotions, deep thoughts, deep relationships, deep attachments. So I think that one of the most soulful parts of anyone's life is home, feeling at home, and taking care of home, and feeling the comfort of home, and having that as your base. So soul has a lot to do with where you live. It's very close to your ordinary life. And it's what makes you human. This is what the philosophers used to say in the Middle Ages, that the soul makes us human. It's like your home. That's a very human thing. You meet somebody who's a great teacher or a well-known person, and you see them kind of at a distance. But if you were to see them at home, you'd really see their soul, because that soul is so close to your intimate life and your ordinary life. Now, spirit is just the opposite in a way. In the spiritual things, in spirit, we tend to want to look beyond the earth, like we look into the sky. People pray, they look up. They don't look into their shoes or their suit or anything. They look up. That is a spirit thing to do. You look at the sky because that's an image of infinity for us. So it kind of gives us a sense that we are addressing the infinite. And theologians are often interested in huge issues, great big issues. Life and death, and particularly death, and what happens after death is a very spiritual issue. People meditate, and they want to get away from their appetites and their physical body and their sexuality and food. They'll diet and more. They won't eat as much because they'll think that will help their spiritual life. So there's a movement away from body and away from the earth and the spirit. And that is a good thing. So both of these things, spirit and soul, are equally important, equally good and valuable, but they're very different. Most of my work has been focused on soul because I think it's been neglected. A lot of people are interested in the spiritual life. And many teachers talk about spirit. I don't think too many talk about soul. Now, when it comes to religion, this is an interesting thing because a good part of religion has to do with the spirit. It's about death and life and how to behave and how the world came into being and getting beyond the earth and all of that, and prayer and meditation. And yet, at the same time, it can be very close to home and part of life, of ordinary life. So in my book on A Religion of One's Own, what I'm trying to suggest is that we could have more soul in our religion. We could see our religious practice as being done at home, having to do with ordinary things like food. And I quote Henry David Thoreau, who says that for him taking a bath is a sacrament. I think he was serious about that, because he understood that religion can be something that is part of ordinary life. It doesn't have to be exalted and made so special and apart. One of my favorite writers using that word is Shunryu Suzuki, the Zen master who really taught many, many Americans in San Francisco. And he has a section in his book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, where he talks about nothing special. That's a very soulful idea, I think. That religion is not so special. It doesn't have to be something that they have to dress up for. It's just ordinary, the ordinary part of life. That's what I want to save and get back to, because I think it's been lost or at least neglected.
You mentioned people having a kind of grief at what we're losing with respect to climate change, a kind of feeling of despair and hopelessness. In your book, how do you counsel people that are deeply affected by such ideas as climate change?
Well, they should be affected by it. We should all be feeling bad about how we are not doing nearly what we need to do with our natural world. This is our being. This is our body. It's like we are not. I like to say we don't live on the planet. We are part of the planet. And I learned in my studies of medieval philosophy that those philosophers said that the earth is like an animal. The earth itself is like an animal. So it's a being, it's an organism. And we don't seem to appreciate that. We treat it like a platform on which we can live. It's like it's made out of plastic or something. And we're going to live on it and do what we want because it's not going to be affected by what we do. That's not a very, I don't think it's a very religious point of view. So people should be feeling bad about it. Not enough are. And when people do feel, individuals feel very distraught about what's happening in their natural environment, then in a way what they're doing is carrying the emotions that we all might have. They feel it strongly. I think they especially feel that other people are not as tuned in as they are. They wonder, why aren't they feeling as bad as I am? That intensifies the emotion. And in a way it makes it a little crazier because they have to carry all this. And they can't offer a solution alone. It's got to be something we all do. So when I'm counseling somebody who feels that way, that's what I will do. That's my attitude. I won't talk to them that way. I don't try to explain things to them, but I have it in my mind, and then we talk about their feeling, and I might affirm their feeling and say, well, maybe it's not such a bad thing you feel this. And maybe it is that you're feeling it by yourself and don't have enough support. Maybe it would help to join a group or get some support and realize that other people do feel what you feel.
Well, my last question is about something that you refer to in the book as portals of wonder. Could you just say a little bit about what these are? And also, in the absence of exposure to the natural world, say if someone lives in a city, how does one access a portal of wonder in an urban environment, for example?
It reminds me of what my friend James Hillman used to say. It really bothered him when people would romanticize nature and say that, well, nature can do this and nature can do that. If you go to nature, you're going to become more spiritual and happier and all these things. He didn't like that because he felt we were splitting the urban life from the country life. And he felt that that was a mistake to put one as something more spiritual or better than the other. He didn't think that was true. And so I'm influenced very much by him in this particular area. I think as I've reflected on it too, I feel the same way. That you can be in the city and you can find all kinds of portals there. For one thing, in most cities you have the arts available to you. And the arts are so important. They are one of the most important portals that we have for our wonder, because you can stand in front of a painting, and you can stand there a long time and be swept away in contemplation. You can feel things and remember things, and it's an education in a way, just to stand in front of a painting. I don't think you have to know much about paintings. I think you just have to be in their presence and feel. That would be the soul approach to the painting. The more spirit way would be to study and learn and figure it all out. The soul approach would be to be intimate with the painting. Or music. I've studied music almost all my life, and for me music is one of the most important arts. And I'm convinced, I say this to people, that my main form of meditation these days is playing the piano. I sit there. I'm not a great pianist by any means, but I can play well enough to forget about the notes and be lost in my fingers and in the sound and in the music. And that to me is a very important form of meditation. So we have all the arts. There's so much could be said about all the arts. And they are portals, and they are primarily in an urban environment. That's where you're going to find the artists primarily. Not that they won't be in the country, but that's a great resource in the city. And gardens are traditionally very important for the soul. And I don't think we realize how important they are. Gardens and parks, very, very important. And they're part of urban life. And gardens are different from the wide open country. They're different. Usually they're more cultivated. And they actually have more symbol, and they direct your fantasy more specifically. So you go into a garden and it's more contained, and it may help you with various moods. You may have place in a garden that helps you with your depression, and another part of the garden that makes you feel good and happy, and another part that helps you remember things. So the gardens and parks specifically have a really important role to play, and they are primarily in the urban environment. Nature itself, of course, is incredibly powerful. So people do leave the city to come to the countryside, to see the open spaces and to see the hills and mountains, to see lakes and rivers and ocean. I mean, each one of those things has a specific role to play. I'd say it is, talk about portals to wonder. They are specific portals. They will take you to particular places. And this is something I learned from my studies in European Renaissance psychology and art, is that I think we've forgotten that we need to go to particular places in our fantasy life and in our emotional life, particular places. Like it's important to go to the ocean as opposed to the river. I think we feel that intuitively. But it's important to have that experience. And we feel the need, and so we try to satisfy it by going to that particular place. That is very important. I think it would help us if we could teach children to follow through on those intuitions and learn that there's a way to meditate and pray and be contemplative for soul and spirit by taking the arts seriously and by seeing nature as something that's there for your soul and not just for natural materials.
Thank you so much.